All right, thank you everybody for making it to my symposium. So before I get started, can you guys just give me a thumbs up if you can see the slides, okay? Okay, so I first want to thank Dr. Zion for guiding me through this incredible process. I'm deeply grateful for her patience, understanding me, her unwavering support, and always seeing me for who I am and not expecting me to change, just to improve and continue growing. So meeting with you and the others who've been in our group each week is something that has really kept me going, and I'm going to cherish those times together. Dr. Ferguson, your constant encouragement and for always making me feel supported is something really special. I feel like I was always able to approach you with thoughts or questions I had throughout this program, and that's been something that I've really been grateful for because you've been there from the start since I began this program. So I'm very happy you're a part of my committee. And Dr. Barnes, it's a gift to finally work with you. Your insight and brilliance in music education has inspired me, and I have been so grateful for your perspective and guidance on everything. And I always resented that I didn't get to work with you when you were coming into Rowan because I missed you by a year or so. So it's great to have you three as a part of this. I also want to dedicate this study and thank multiple people who supported me and stayed by my side. So to my students, they encouraged me to be better and better, and we encountered a lot of challenges together, and our program has continued to thrive. So this work is for them, teachers, school administrators, members of the school community, especially my EHT community. I know we wake up every day with such purpose, so this is for you. And to my cohort in this doctoral program, I could not have gotten through without you guys, friends, family, and then my mom and dad. My mom is very innovative, and she was someone who inspired me to always look at the individual and see how they learn, see who they are. And my dad always told me I had to learn rules so I could break them. So, in some way, shape, or form, I've been carrying all that wisdom with me, and here we are. So, my study is called From Fragments to Functions, and it's a heuristic inquiry of itinerant music teachers through a critical systems theory lens. And I know that's a lot to unpack. So, I'm actually going to start off with introducing some key terms that are going to be throughout this study so you guys can understand. So, for the roles and systems, an itinerant music teacher is a music teacher who teaches across multiple schools or programs. And itinerant teaching slash itinerancy is the staffing model that requires educators to travel between sites or manage multiple programs. And this often has many results, but a big one is the fragmented structural conditions. So, what structural conditions are organizational factors such as scheduling, staffing, space allocation, and this is what shapes the daily work of these teachers. Also, contextual conditions are the physical and logistical factors that influence how instruction is delivered, including access to space, time, and resources. And then professional belonging is the teacher's sense of inclusion, recognition, and legitimacy within a school or department. So also, I want to make sure that I'm clear on the meaning and method I used in this study, which is focusing on teacher identity, which is the involving understanding that educators hold about who they are professionally, how their roles shape this, relationship, and working conditions. And then meaning making goes out with heuristic inquiry, but it's the process through which individuals interpret and assign significance to their lived experiences. So, heuristic inquiry is a qualitative methodology that centers lived experience and positions the researcher and participants as co constructors of knowledge, while critical systems theory is a theoretical lens, and it's a framework that's used to examine how interconnected structures shape policy, equity, access, and working conditions. So, movement one, entering the field. And by the field, I mean music education. So, I entered the field 2 weeks from getting my bachelor's, and I imagined my career would look like this: a beautiful classroom with storage. I can scaffold. The students each have one of their own instruments. You can see there's a computer, a nice, beautiful classroom with windows and storage space, a quiet space where the kids are engaged and can hear their teacher, acoustic paneling, storage in the back, chairs, music stands, shelves with a ton of equipment, books, resources. So, what's an itinerant music teacher? So, you work in multiple buildings as a music ed teacher, music educator, and you teach in varied spaces or buildings. You also work across multiple contents. So, you're known as a floating or traveling teacher. And working across multiple contents is something that's common with music educators because in New Jersey, when you get your certification, you're certified preschool through 12th grade. You're also certified you can teach any ensemble. So even though I'm a strings teacher, I can teach band, choir, general music, technology, piano, and they typically exist as itinerant positions because it can expand access, stretch resources, and really share expertise across spaces. So if you have a staff member who is like me, a strings person, I can be used in all schools. And then you might only need one strings person. You're able to do more with less, as Roman frames it. So our responsibilities are very much the same as any other teacher. We have instructional responsibilities, but then we also have to think about our performance preparation. And another layer is mobility and adaptation. So how do we move across our various teaching sites, and then how do we adapt to those sites? And this study does not examine the responsibilities themselves, but it examines the systems that shape how these roles function. And that's what I'm going to go more into. So my lived reality, I've been assigned spaces that were often left over, communal, and unfit as an itinerant teacher. I've taught on stages, dressing rooms, old storage rooms, and this was actually one of my favorite classrooms because when it rained, you would hear all the roof water come down the pipe. During lunches, so on the other side of that curtain, there'd be about 300 children eating lunch outside during COVID, which again was actually kind of nice until it started getting dark earlier and cold. And then during my lunch and prep. So when you're an itinerant teacher, you have limited time in each space. And sometimes the only common time you have to see certain groups of students, depending on their schedules, might fall during your lunch and prep. So what I noticed when I looked at my schedules also is that time and space didn't look the same for me or my program. Oh, is someone unmuted? So if you look at this, you can kind of see it's a little ambiguous. I have just lessons, don't know what grade, didn't know how many were expected to come or who. If you look here, you can see there's different sections, and I won't spend too much time on this, but this was what I was given the beginning of the school year. And it took me a little bit to understand who to expect. So my experiences with itinerancy, this was a quote directly taken from my dissertation that really sums it up. Although I carry 20 pounds of material with me each day, what people miss is the invisible weight of belonging nowhere, yet being everywhere. So when I started off in my first position as an itinerant teacher 10 years ago, I had my violin, my backpack, my laptop, my teaching materials, my lunch, and a cup of coffee. And someone said, "You look like you're going to the airport." And it took me a second, but then I realized, yeah, I carry my materials around all day because I have split teaching time and I need to make sure I have everything with me. I don't have a place to leave my stuff. Where do I belong? Do I have access to my space today, or are they using the stage for an assembly? So those were a couple things I encountered teaching, but also I want to highlight that you have multiple sets of administration, teaching materials, teaching spaces and schedules, ensembles. So I teach beginners at one school, but then maybe advanced at the other school. And I had to split my commitments quite frequently. And that weight that was unseen was how I adapted to the instructional spaces, how I was constantly transitioning between roles and expectations in the two schools, how I was planning across multiple sites and schools with concerts, lessons. If the school has testing this week, when do I get to see my kids? Lack of professional belonging because I felt isolated from and disconnected from the rest of the school. So I began to question whether or not these were individual challenges because of me or patterns that I needed to explore further. And this is 10 years later in my current position. And despite these conditions, I always found a way to make it work. I have supportive administration. I still encounter a lot of these challenges. And after 10 years, I got tired of just making it work. And that's what fueled this study. So movement 2, why this study? My experiences in multiple itinerant roles revealed recurring structural barriers. And I began to recognize that these challenges were not isolated or personal because patterns across the two districts I worked in suggested that there were systemic design issues that were impacting me. And this led me to examine how working conditions shaped my professional identity, my instruction, and my sustainability in these positions. So I became committed to identifying leverage points for systemic improvement. So past literature, what we know is a lot of what I stated. Itinerant teachers experience fragmented schedules, limited instructional space. They feel a disconnect. And also I learned that organizational structures often prioritize efficiency over instructional coherence in arts education. So going off of that, structural and fiscal decisions disproportionately shape art staffing models. And role expectations and supervision varies across sites, and this is what contributes to that ambiguity and isolation. So a lot of what I was encountering is in past literature. But I want to highlight that Schultz's work was surrounded with ecological systems theory. So what Schultz said was that itinerant music teachers face systemic barriers that hinder their effectiveness and contribute to inequities in music education, yet their experiences are often underrepresented in educational research and policy. And what I wanted to understand more, kind of going off of this, was the systemic breakdown and what's not being talked about. What have I experienced and what have others experienced that we haven't looked at in this way? So what I discovered was that itinerant teaching is structurally fragmented. We are in multiple buildings, we have inconsistent schedules, we don't have a dedicated teaching space, and we're often answering to split administrative oversight. So it's okay in one school pulling kids from gym or when we're allowed to see them. It could be completely different, and we have to know that. So systems are not fully designed for itinerancy. There's role ambiguity, there's conflicting expectations. We're not always able to be integrated into the rest of the school community, and policy decisions are made without even considering our realities. So the impacts are systemic. It's not because of who we are as individuals. Teacher effectiveness is shaped by structure, collaboration is hindered by positioning, and ultimately students experience these inconsistencies in access and continuity, and this affects our sense of belonging and our professional identity, because this is what we're seeing reflect in our teaching. So another thing I want to point out before I introduce the problem of practice is how districts respond to resource constraints. So budget reductions in art staffing have led districts to consolidate positions. This has been going on for decades. Recently, with the budget cuts that are happening in 2024, I learned that one teacher is often distributed across multiple positions to do more with less. And the structural conditions often remain unchanged despite the increased mobility of these teachers. So these roles are frequently created out of necessity rather than a structural intentional redesign. So going into my purpose statement and research question, the purpose of my qualitative heuristic inquiry was to examine how itinerant teachers in New Jersey experience and make meaning of structurally complex roles, and to understand how systemic design shapes their instructional practice, their professional identity, and their sense of belonging. And this was interpreted through critical systems theory because my study sought to identify the leverage points for more equitable and sustainable support in music education. I have always been in an itinerant role, and when I started these roles in my first district, I was told it was never going to change. So I really wanted to understand these roles and understand how we can improve them, because I have not changed in 10 years from being itinerant. So my main research question is, how do itinerant teachers make meaning of their roles regarding their experiences regarding identity, instruction, and systemic support? Then I created 4 sub-questions that go off from that main research question to branch off into: how do itinerant teachers describe the personal and professional identity they develop through working in an itinerant position? What instructional adaptations and challenges do itinerant music teachers experience across the teaching sites? How do itinerant teachers perceive the systemic structures that shape their daily scheduling, space, and support? And last, in what ways do they find connection, value, and sustainability in their roles? So, the significance of this, the so what, and why this study matters is it reframes itinerant teaching challenges as issues of systemic design rather than individual teacher coping. It centers itinerant music teachers' lived experiences within a staffing model that's often under-examined in research and policy. It more deeply examines the staffing structure that's shaped by fiscal and organizational pressures, and it identifies the structural and administrative leverage points to support equitable and sustainable music programs. And this matters for itinerant teachers and stationary teachers, because if these budget cuts are going to continue, they may find themselves in itinerant positions. And also it matters for pre-service teachers, because when I went to college, I didn't even know these positions existed, and I didn't know what they came with. So school and district leaders can benefit from this study, because if they're implementing these positions, they'll understand how to better integrate them. And then music education stakeholders and policymakers can benefit from this study as well, because it leads to more equitable practices in music education. So movement 3, how I studied the problem. I used I used heuristic inquiry as my methodological lens because it centers lived experiences. So the researcher is also an instrument in this. Meaning is constructed through reflection and dialogue, focus on perception, identity, and lived realities, and it allows for a deeper exploration of itinerant teachers' daily experiences because of what it essence of it. So in short, if you never heard about this before, it illuminates how teachers experience their roles, while critical systems theory, the theoretical lens, centers structural design. So it looks at how systems shape roles and behaviors, how organizational structures influence equity and access. It identifies patterns of power and constraint, but also highlights leverage points for change. So while heuristic inquiry illuminates how teachers experience their roles, critical systems theory illuminates how systems produce the conditions that impact itinerant roles. So together, these lenses allowed me to examine both lived experience and systemic design, not as isolated problems or even symptoms like a lot of past literature has, but it views them as interconnected structures. So just to give a little bit more of why critical systems theory, it looks at the interdependence of systems. So one thing that Schultz did highlight was how schools function as complex ecosystems, and they are interrelated subsystems of teachers, scheduling, buildings, learning spaces, and changes in one of these subsystems affects all others. But also CST helps uncover the systemic barriers. So how resource disparities, fragmented scheduling, and weak support structures continue to reinforce things that lead to teacher burnout and student access, which is, again, those symptoms we keep seeing in these itinerant positions. So it also, as I mentioned, identifies points of intervention where we can identify the leverage points in the system where even small strategic and intentional changes can result in broad and more sustainable improvements. So in short, it emphasizes how inequities are produced and sustained, not as isolated issues, but by interactions between structures, boundaries, and resources. So the methodology, the heuristic inquiry, I used it because it centers both the researcher and participant experiences. And as somebody who has lived as an itinerant teacher for 10 years and felt that isolation, I wanted to understand what it was like for people who were in positions like me. And heuristic inquiry values the researcher's personal connection to a phenomenon as a strength and not a bias. So to me, that was perfect. It also supports immersion, reflection, and co-creation, meaning through dialogue and storytelling, sharing. So since I didn't often have a sounding board for this, in my 10 years, that aspect of heuristic inquiry allowed me to connect with other people, and it allowed us to have a deeper meaning of this complex issue, real world issue of the systemic challenges faced by itinerant music teachers. So a main aspect of heuristic inquiry is that there are 6 phases that guided the study. And the phases for me were not linear, and they're not something that you kind of do in order necessarily, but they overlap and they're recursive throughout the study. So the initial engagement was my 10 years as an itinerant music teacher, and this is what shaped my problem of practice. And then immersion occurred through in-depth interviews, reflexive journaling, and sustained narratives and artifacts when I began interacting with the participants. And incubation took place during the pauses in between data collection and coding and familiarizing myself with what the participants were saying. And then illumination was during the inductive coding, where recurring experiences and shared meanings became more visible across participants, and I started seeing patterns. So the explication occurred through the thematic analysis, where I was refining themes, examining how identity, instruction, and systems shape the experiences all of us were having. And the last thing I did was a creative synthesis. And I integrated the themes and the experiences and stories that were shared with me into a poem, which I'm going to share at the end of this. I also did create some visuals as well that are in my public scholarship products. So in short, this is how I put everything together. This framework is informed by literature on itinerant teaching, so identity and instructional conditions, research that documented how structural conditions shape teacher effectiveness, and then I used critical systems theory and heuristic inquiry. So here are what we know and what we encounter. And then critical systems theory and heuristic inquiry led me to create an emergent conceptual framework where I was able to uncover structural inefficiencies, advocate for more sustainable policies, center teacher voices, and inform equity-based improvements in music education. So who was in my study? The selection criteria was that participants were currently hired as itinerant music teachers in New Jersey, and they taught in a preschool to 12th grade setting, and that was it. So purposeful sampling was used, and I selected participants who fit that criteria since they were best positioned to provide insight into the systemic, instructional, and organizational aspects of our roles. And then I used snowball sampling. So what this did for me was it helped me recruit additional participants through referrals. And in South Jersey, we have a very small music educator network, but I was able to pass my research on through who I knew through the network to reach beyond South Jersey. And I was able to get a very diverse demographic of music teachers across New Jersey, all different types of music teaching. So band, general music, orchestra, music technology, all across the state. So itinerant teaching looks different across different sites. Originally, I thought it was teachers like me who traveled in between buildings and had to take their load with them, halfway through the day or every other day, and they had to go to the different campuses, and they had their fragmented schedules and taught in the unfit spaces. And 6 of the participants did fit this criteria, while 3 of them actually were room-to-room traveling teachers. So most of the time, they were teaching off of their carts, and they would bring all of their material from room to room. And they also do manage more than one school. They also their positions require them to go to multiple schools. So not only are they going room to room in one school, they're doing it ×3, where they do this in multiple buildings. So a lot of times they will do this and then teach choir on the side, first thing in the morning, that first period, they'll have kids come down for a pull-out rehearsal. And these positions are often relied on because they give teachers break during prep and lunch, which adds a really unique layer of complexity to their roles. Then we have single building and single room multi-directors. And there was one in this study out of the 10 I recruited, and she taught band and orchestra in one classroom in one school, but she had to travel in the sense of her pedagogy had to keep changing every other period. So she's teaching band and she's teaching orchestra. So I know that's a whole different can of worms for music educators in the room, but that was fascinating to learn about. So getting into it now, who participated? So I reached out to participants. I recruited them, and then they filled out a form on Rowan Qualtrics, and that's how I shifted through who was able to participate. And then I sent an email out, and I said, I want to make sure we're keeping you anonymous, and I asked them to choose a pseudonym that was a music terminology. So what I find really awesome about this is that they chose pseudonyms that represented their positions for the most part. So you can see here, Allegro chose Allegro because it means a fast, bright tempo. And this participant chose it because it's from a character in a general music book they read, their class. But then this participant said, it's also because my job is so fast paced going in between buildings that I want something that represents that kind of like intensity, I feel. But then there was Bossa Nova, who went to 4 schools, and Bossa Nova said, it's fun for me. I want something that's positive and the energy changes. Fermata's was a funny one because this participant was teaching full-time in one building, now teaches in multiple. And this participant said, I chose Fermata because it means to hold. I'm holding on for dear life. And this participant was actually the only one who did not like itinerant teaching, while the other 9 said they kind of enjoy it. And she was teaching 600 students. And then once, due to financial restrictions, started taking on the load of the teacher who had to get cut. So now she sees 1,400 students in 2 weeks instead of her 600 to 700. And as I mentioned, I participated in this study. My name was Forte because that translates to strong. And I felt this sense of strength from creating this study. And I was able to be loud and speak up about something that I often had to bury and just kind of push through. So I'll give you guys another 30 seconds or so to look at this. And then the middle column is their teaching role. So where they teach, how many schools they go to, while responsibilities are what they have to manage and how many students they see in the subject area. So a little more in detail. So I'll give you a moment to look at that. Okay. All right. So how I collected the data, I had 3 main sources of doing so. I did interviews. So I had one semi-structured individual interview that lasted about 60 minutes with each participant. And then I invited them all to participate in one optional group interview, which took 90 minutes. And 6 of the 10 participants came to this one. But before that, I encouraged them, they could have any questions or concerns or clarification before our initial interview, that I was available. And then I made sure after the 2 interviews, they could follow up with me. And 7 of the 10 actually did provide more information they thought about. So that was extremely helpful, with just getting more information and hearing their stories. I also kept a researcher journal, and this was to document my reflections, my reactions, and keep me engaged in the study through all processes. And I actually began this when I started the dissertation. And I used visual data, so I used artifacts. Participants shared photos and videos of their teaching spaces, performances. The first thing all of them showed me were actually their schedules, all 10 of them, and then items that captured inside jokes, other cultures, memes, visual representations. And the 3 of these helped me triangulate data and deepen my interpretation. So, movement 4, the essence of the job. One participant said, "We can make it work, but that does not mean it works." And this was said in our group interview. And I laughed because that same sentiment was shared across all participants at some point in their interview. And even though this isn't my big finding, I thought it would be kind of cool to include that because that's pretty much how this started for me, was that I make it work, but it's hard. So, data analysis and procedures, an overview. So after the interviews, I transcribed on Otter AI, and this allowed me to revisit the interview and repeat a review of the interview and the artifacts that they shared with me, and kind of look at each participant in their entirety. And then the initial coding was in vivo. So verbatim, I used their exact words to create codes when I revisited. And between all the participants, I had somewhere between 25 and 50 codes, depending how much they shared, with each participant. And then I went back when I finished this process, and that was the pattern development. So I grouped the related codes into categories. And as I refined this, it led to the theme construction. And after I developed 5 themes, I looked at it through a critical systems theory lens. And before I talk about that, the themes were all grounded in participants' lived experiences. The patterns I identified through this process reflected shared meaning across contents. And I made sure to really keep everything verbatim because I wanted to preserve the language they used during their interviews. So going into the 5 themes, here's where I want to bring the critical systems theory up again. Impact on identity and belonging was the first theme. Shifting to fit, misaligned and fragmented, systemic disconnect, and conditional support with administration. And then resilience leads to empowerment. So these 5 themes, and I didn't notice this until literally about a week or 2 ago, it tells a story. So to get into each theme, theme 1 was impact on identity and belonging. What participants said was, "I don't really feel like I belong anywhere. I'm part of every school, but not fully part of any of them. Sometimes I feel more like support staff than a music teacher, even though I'm running an entire program. I'm more of a music educator now. The only sign of me in that building is my cart. That's all I have." So what Tremolo said about being a music educator, a story that he shared with me was how he went to school, he was a trumpet major, and then he graduated and he took on his first job. And since then, he taught choir, orchestra, general music, music technology, piano, and he kind of has this more vast collection of skills. And he explained how it's more of an umbrella term as music educator than band teacher, trumpet teacher. And that same sentiment was shared across more than half of the participants. So that was one that really stuck out. So, in short, a lot of conversations were, where do I belong? I feel peripheral to my department. How do my students see me? So this was an artifact that was shared, and I know it's a little hard to see, and it says the image of a string teacher, and I'll read a couple of them, but it's implied this is a traveling teacher. So the arrow that points to the hair said hair was frizzled from the downpour in between schools, so traveling. Another one, finger injury from defective pegs. I actually got a concussion recently because a base fell on my head at work. Stains from eating lunch in the car because we're always on the go. And bad posture from hauling too many chairs and stands. And this kind of narrates what it's like for us. This one was shared by a participant who taught on a stage, and she was not at the school that day, and the school had an assembly. and it was a last-minute decision by the principal to award the students. This participant's equipment was thrown off the stage into a closet, resulting in broken instruments. So not only did this teacher have to fix the instruments, but they shared how this really symbolizes how they feel in that school, that they can just so easily be pushed to the side, not caring what consequences it has. And this is one teacher teaches on a cart. This participant said how this is the only sign of them in the whole entire school. And before that sign was on there, somebody took the cart to move their equipment from their car to their classroom, and it was missing. This teacher couldn't teach for days because everything is in tow due to this cart. And due to the space that this teacher, well, I should say lack of space this teacher has, anything this teacher does has to be mobile. Without that cart, can't do it. So the theme overview here is that professional identity is shaped by movement across schools, space, and expectations. And they're often positioned as visitors rather than being fully integrated faculty members. So belonging is tied to their visibility, their recognition, and how included they feel within the schools. So professional validation is rooted mostly in their strong relationships with students and that they have through their programs rather than being integrated as members of staff. So the second theme, shifting to fit, what participants said, I'm constantly changing how I teach depending on the space, the schedule, and what I'm allowed to do that day. You just have to figure out how to make it work, even if it's not what's best for instruction. I've taught in closets, hallways, and during lunch periods, separated by a curtain. I always felt like I just had to adapt or modify my lessons based on where they took place. So in short, they make it work. They adjust their curriculum, their pacing, and their pedagogy depending where they're teaching, but they also carry an emotional labor of this constant flexibility. The teachers who are on a cart, they might be allowed to use the computer, erase the board, move the desks. The next classroom they roll into, they might not be able to use any of that, so they have to modify every single lesson. So this is something that a participant called her consistency kit. She knows that if she has 2 of everything, she's able to keep consistency for her students and ensure that all of her lessons are planned similarly, even if there are those structural changes. This is one participant who's on a cart. She keeps her materials at her house. And her house has even been something that she extended into in order to ensure that she has a place to keep her materials safe because she doesn't have anywhere at school. Another mobile teacher shared this. And again, everything has to be on wheels. They can provide the instruction, but it has to be modified in a way where they can fit into the spaces they're giving it. So the theme overview here is that instruction is continuously adapted to space, scheduling, and resource constraints. So they develop multiple versions of their lessons to accommodate the environments, and they create the consistency kits and portable systems to sustain continuity for their students. And adaptability is an embedded feature of itinerant teaching. So theme 3, misaligned and fragmented. Participants said, my schedule looks fine on paper, but in reality, there's no time to move, set up, or reset. Assemblies happen here. So when assembly is happening, my lessons are canceled. They did not think about how I would see 1,400 students in just 2 weeks, and that was for Mata when she became itinerant. So in short, they rarely have a dedicated space in their schools. They teach during their lunch and preps. There's constant setup and tear down because they're on the go, and they face the different expectations. They also lack communication. So a lot of times they implement these itinerant positions without really giving you much insight on how do they work. So this is Bossa Nova's schedule, who was in a high school the second half of the day, but it looks empty to his high school schedule because he has the middle school placements. And he actually had to over-explain so many times where he goes that first half of the day. And he shared how if he was an itinerant, that wouldn't be the case. Going back to the story of the broken instruments, this teacher really said, if I knew there was an assembly, I could have had it moved, but I was at a whole different school. So that fragmented schedule caused this. And then this is literally a fragmented schedule for a teacher who's in 3 schools and has 3 different days. So the theme overview here is that systems are designed around stationary teaching models, not itinerant realities. Schedules appeared on paper, open on paper, while masking invisible instructional labor. So that teacher who had the broken instruments had to cancel lessons in order to fix the instruments and ensure that they got picked up by the instrument companies to get the fixes. And the shared or temporary spaces disrupt continuity and program stability because we're at odds with all of this. And the expectations for performance and outcomes remains unchanged despite our constraints. So the second to last theme is systemic disconnect and conditional support, administrative support. So support really depends on who sees you and whether they understand your role. And that really is a huge piece of this. And another thing I want to share is what Cadenza said, where each building has different set of expectations and you're left to navigate them on your own. Harmony. You can't say you want to highlight our programs, then not provide me with the time and space to do that, to prepare the kids. You just have to go with what they tell you. Administrators really set the tone for the building. So a lot of times these teachers, in short, they feel forgotten. They feel tied to their visibility or when it's convenient for them to get support. And they feel that navigating with multiple administrators creates those competing expectations. So a lot of this is reflective in past research, but I designed this funnel, and I'm not going to go through every little bullet point, but what I found from critical systems theory and looking at the power and who makes these decisions and how they affect the different layers is that administrative decisions is where we find the models, the staffing, the schedule designs, assignments, etc. And that's where we encounter our system designs. So that's how many spaces we teach, what we're expected to do, what we have access to do, what rooms are left over for us, etc. And this results in the teacher's conditions for us itinerant music teachers. And this is all the stuff we know, right? That's been in past research. And then it trickles down to the student experiences. So this is something that I created from what participants were telling me and then thinking about it through a critical systems theory lens. So the theme overview here is that administrative understanding varies by building and leader. And decisions about scheduling and space are made without consulting the itinerant music teachers. And they feel that support is frequently tied to how their performance is, how visible it is, their performance visibility and how often the administrator is at their performances. Sorry, I keep talking in circles, rather than their instructional labor. And teachers absorb the structural gaps through constantly having to explain their roles and advocating for their programs. So the last theme, and this is a dangerous one because resilience and what they have to do leads to them feeling empowered. So when I got towards the end of the interviews, and we were wrapping up really, okay, what keeps you in these positions? They said, the longer I've been doing this, the more comfortable I am. I'm able to take risks and try new things. I was the only one who stayed. This is who teaches 1,400 students. I was the main music maker in that community. It's the families and connections I made throughout both of the buildings, right? So in short, they find purpose in advocating for their programs, refraining itinerancy as expertise, and they find purpose in this, their community. So this is the end of the year for Mata had a huge community performance where she saw all of her students at both schools come together, parents, teachers. This was because of her. Harmony, who's on a cart, she's in 3 schools, and she said, I get to connect with every student in that district. I get to have these connections across the board, and I'm making a difference. And this is actually one of my classrooms. You can see I have a student who's organizing music. I have another one who's conducting the group, and 300 kids are eating lunch on the other side of that curtain, but we have our own little community. So the overview here is that it requires ongoing perseverance, innovation, and self-advocacy to survive in these positions. And the adaptation is reframed as a professional growth for a lot of these teachers rather than a deficiency, like a lot of us think in the beginning of doing these positions. So confidence and ownership is developed through navigating the systemic barriers, which is kind of a catch-22, but meaning is sustained through our commitment to our student and the musical communities. So how the research questions, whoops, I don't know what just happened, I'm sorry. Oh geez, I'm sorry. Okay, so how the research questions are answered, I shared a lot with the theme overviews, but I just want to highlight that the identity and belonging, these teachers, in the beginning of the interviews, I asked what got them into music. Music was the safe space they felt as children and where they belonged. A lot of them want to create the same space for their students. So we grow into these positions because it really is what we have to do to survive. And these positions are fluid and adaptive, and they don't anchor their belonging in buildings or physical spaces. It's in their programs. For instructional adaptations, it's reliant on what they have access to and what spaces they are in. So instructional adaptation is a professional skill that is defining of itinerant music teachers, and it requires them to constantly adjust to time, space, and resources. And it is a professional skill they develop. So systemic structures and support, they describe that systems are built around stationary models, and as a result, itinerant teachers have to design around structures that weren't built for them. And sustainability and professional value, it's relational, it's not structural for us. And teachers stay because of the students. We do it all for our students. And I know there's a lot of bullet points here, but I'm just summarizing. We can revisit it at the end if anyone wants me to go back. But my main research question, I learned that across the 5 themes I developed, there's a significant pattern of 3 interconnected processes that accompany being an itinerant teacher, and answered my main research question, which is our commitment to our students and our programs as being our major source of purpose, and really our regulation, because that is the one thing that doesn't change. Instructional adaptation is an embedded feature of our itinerant identity, and in that catch-22, empowerment and advocacy is evolving, but it's shaped by the very constraints we have to constantly overcome. And even though these processes don't replace the 5 themes I developed, they are interwoven throughout them and collectively answered my main research question. So the implications and recommendations I have is that itinerant music teaching must be understood as a distinct and systemically shaped teaching model. And instructional quality is influenced by organizational design, not by the teacher's skill. And professional identity and belonging are shaped by the structural positioning within the schools. So structural implications, access to proper, dedicated, or consistent teaching space with secure storage. We're not asking for much. Built-in travel time between sites that's not taken from our lunch or prep, and we have time that's allocated for our setup and breakdowns. Alignment of schedules as best as possible between buildings, and access to basic resources, projection, sound, enough space. So administrative implications, establish one designated supervising administrator. I'm blessed because I do have a fine and performing arts supervisor I can go to. Not all districts have that. So even if it's a building principal, provide written role clarity across sites. It will save us a ton of explaining if we have something that all districts are able to access and be aware of. Align expectations for performance, evaluation, and communication. Coordinate calendars across school. Our adaptability should not replace the intentional systemic support we could be getting. And last, relational implications. Ensure that inclusion is in faculty meetings and professional learning. Make sure people know who we are, not just our names. Provide shared planning across and collaboration time across districts, but also our departments. There was one year where I was the only teacher who had my common planning time on period. There was not a single fine or performing arts teacher I could talk to until I got it straightened out the next year, which again, blessing. Recognize itinerant teachers as full members of school communities and support our advocacy and our leadership development. We have a lot of insight because we're in multiple buildings. We can offer a lot. So these recommendations shift the focus from individual teacher adaptation to systemic design improvements. So now I'm getting into my public scholarship, oh my goodness, products. So I created this framework based off what I just shared with you, and it's a system-based framework that derived from the findings. So it focuses on the structural, administrative, and relational areas that I just explained, but it starts off with role clarity, structural conditions, administrative support, and what needs we may need. So it asks questions, it's interactive, it explains our roles really clearly as well. And then it continues to explain what the issues may look like, because I know for me, when I was itinerant, I could tell something was off. I didn't know what or where it was coming from. So this framework I designed, and I included it in one of my public scholarship products. So before I get into that, I did write an article I will be submitting to the Research Journal of Music Education. I wrote a practitioner article I'll be submitting to Tempo Magazine, which is another music education journal. And then last week I presented this poster, which has the framework and the funnel that I created at a poster session for research and music ed. And then I ran a professional development for itinerant music teachers. So before I get to the very last thing, I do want to acknowledge that the study reflects a small context-specific group of itinerant music teachers who are in New Jersey and only New Jersey, and that my positionality as an itinerant music teacher did shape interpretation, since I was able to relate to everything that was being said, and the contextual factors, so district structure, scheduling, it can vary across settings. So I understand that this doesn't represent all itinerant music teachers. and the ethical considerations. IRB approval was obtained before all data collection, informed consent was secured and collected, and I ensured that everything was confidential and participants were anonymous. And I gave attention to power dynamics that are inherent in researcher and participant relationships. So the very last thing I'm going to leave with you is my creative synthesis, and it tells the story of being itinerant and really what participants shared with me. So I'm going to share this right now. You look like you're going to the airport, they laughed as I entered the school doors. My body was loaded up with everything needed to teach, to perform, to explore. An instrument case slung on my shoulder is the golden ticket that has gotten me everywhere. But 10 years later, we're still here, with a backpack full of chargers and lesson materials, even a lunch that typically goes untouched. I run from space to borrowed space, my laptop, the only tether to keep me connected and appear put together. I taught in rooms once meant for storage, in corners no one claimed as their own. Sorry. Temporary, yet with a class size now overgrown. Hallways, closets, boiler rooms. No windows, only dripping pipes. Sometimes I wondered, why do I try? Do these spaces mirror how they see me? Just an empty, transient shadow sneaking by. Sometimes they set me on a stage, a space that was made to shine. Built for the spotlight, the show, the applause, not for these lessons of mine. A curtain divides our world into two, but on our side, the cafeteria noise breaks through. Hundreds of children talk and shout. Principals yell through the microphones, barking orders out. And where else is there for me to go? Upstairs, with my teaching load. Yet again, everything in tow. Told to go to a room where I'm not wanted, a space another calls their own. Respect, something I'm not shown. The irony, I teach in a space, a stage, a showcase room, but it hides us more than it shows, as if our daily labor and efforts are a secret only we know. But still, music fills the spaces, memories flood the air, and for a moment I forget the weight I bear. The spotlight flickers briefly, perhaps once or twice a year, when applause greets my product, but never the journey here. The story is not mine alone, it lives in others too. We teach from carts and in corners, our programs sometimes cut in two. Students ask where we vanished, why our presence is so brief. Colleagues may welcome us, though only halfway, because others remind us we're just guests, not here to stay. Still, these struggles shape our identity, but our strength becomes a shared song. Pause and look again. These same spaces have also made us strong. Smiles of students mirror back our own remembered youth, and through their voices, laughter, and songs, we reconstruct our truth. In these moments, we must remember it was worth the miles all along, because it has always been about wherever the music is. That's always where we belong. Thank you. Questions and feedback.
All righty. So I would like to open the floor now to anybody who is a participant and has a question. So this is not the time for you to tell her how amazing she is. I'll give you that moment later. Right now is the moment to ask a question about her research. So anybody who's a participant, just unmute and ask your question if you have one.
Hi, Kate. I'm wondering if there was anything particularly surprising in the findings, something you just never would have expected.
Oh man. Oh geez, there was a lot. I will say I was surprised by how many actually enjoyed being itinerant. And even though that wasn't like a huge finding that I like really went into, I feel like a lot of literature highlights how hard it is. But what's so interesting is only 1 out of 10 said, this is something I actually enjoy. I kind of grew to like it. I like that it's different every day. It works for me. I'm used to it. I will say that through looking at this with critical systems theory, I was overwhelmed how interconnected everything was and the structures. And when I created that funnel, that was one of the most, I just felt like I could breathe when I discovered that. To get a little more specific about the findings, I think just how universal everything is and inherent to these positions. Because as an itinerant teacher myself, there were times I was the only one in my whole district who did what I do. For my current district, we have quite a few of us, but we never really talk about these things. So kind of pulling from these participants who are in so many different environments and districts and school systems. I think just the fact that we had this shared reality was just mind blowing to me. Thank you. Anyone else?
Dr. Zahn, we can ask a question right on the committee as well.
I want
Was it for
the participants first, and then we'll go to the committee questions.
Sure.
Yeah. So any other participant questions?
I would love to jump in. As far as your recommendations and implications going further, you talked about the importance of administration and supervisors and dedicated sort of, time and place. How do you think that it would be best to advocate for something like that?
Sure. So it's complicated because, as I mentioned, it is different from school district to school district and how they function. What I found was that it's not always a matter of this administrator supportive, they're not. Kind of as Bossa Nova touched on, it's how much do they understand your roles? Are they able to even like process what it's like for us? And that's why I created that framework, because it really starts that conversation of, hey, let's get to the specifics instead of just saying it's hard and we need help. And that's something that I think when I presented at NAFME last week, that was where that light bulb moment went off, where it's more that we understand how to survive in our roles, but it doesn't mean we always understand how to explain that to people. So I would say my framework does bridge that gap of what they know and what they don't know, the decisions they're making, how it impacts us. For me, I have a history of documenting what's hard for me. And before I ever started this study, I was able to go to admin with those challenges and have a conversation with them. And sometimes it might be one that gives you the time of day. So I think it's also seeking out that connection to make those changes. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
All right.
Tony?
Any other audience questions?
Kate, have you found in your research that this is mainly an expectation that most superintendents or supervisors expect from their music teachers? Did you find that most are itinerant, or do most have their own classroom?
In this study?
Yeah.
So I found that, aligning with past research, the itinerant music teachers, they don't have their spaces. Some had no spaces. They were often shared or communal. It was very rare that any of them had their own classroom that was their own space. Out of everybody, there were 2. Where it was
Thank
like,
you.
that's their space. Yep. So out of the 10, there were only 2.
One more shot at audience questions. Any audience members have a question?
I have a statement, but it's not a question about our research.
Oh, okay. That'll come in a minute.
Till later, okay.
Dr. Barnes, how about you? Your questions.
My question was it's very relevant, and it has to do within your proposal. You mentioned geography, and so of this transient teacher. So I wanted to give you a little bit of my story that we've talked about, and then go to the question. From Maryland from Maryland down to Virginia, the transient teacher is a thing. I went to school in
Mhm.
Maryland. When 3rd grade and under, normally before 4th grade band begins, most times your teachers are transient, and counties in Maryland are huge. This District of Columbia, DC, those areas are huge, but for some reason, there is a lot more transient teachers there than any other place I've been. Fast forward, I end up being a teacher in Florida and Texas. There are no transient teachers. It doesn't matter if it's the smallest district or a one school town. They hire full-time elementary, full-time band directors, full-time middle, high school, and this goes from Florida to Texas to Georgia, Alabama, and most of the South. So I've experienced, as a student, I had a transient teacher, Miss Thorne. That was our transient teacher. Mr. Vaughn was the band director. And then we had all these other teachers kind of sprinkled in Florida and Texas. That was just it. I was either the teacher or there was one teacher. So what did you notice as you talked about geography in your proposal? Like, what did you notice about geography as far as the idea of the transient teacher in other parts of the country? Because we noticed things like like the National Association for Music Ed, NAFME, the accrediting bodies, those things really don't exist out west. It varies from school to school out west rather than district to district. So as far as geography, what did you find that was like of interest or that of noticed or that was something? Because it's definitely it's an Eastern Shore thing, it's a Mid-Atlantic thing, the transient teacher, but I've noticed in places I've taught, it's not been that.
Mhm. So I didn't really, that's the thing, I didn't really compare to what other like states are doing because it was heuristic inquiry. So I did try to keep it as close to what I do as possible. And what really fueled this study was that I've taught in 2 districts in New Jersey, in different parts of New Jersey. So I was towards the Philly area, where um, down here, it's really just my district that offers a strings program. Both of my jobs are itinerant. So I kept it close to, I kept my study close to my experiences as possible, just to honor heuristic inquiry. So I don't know too much about what other states are doing. I know you and I have spoken about it. And that might be something I could extend into after this study for sure.
Yeah. What did you? We can stick to your geography then. So, what did you
Sure.
notice, like in your space, like
So
from
in my
your
space,
school to the next school?
yeah, so what I noticed is that the first school I taught in, it was closer to the Philly area. And the only real example I saw in the South Jersey area as a whole was Washington Township. And they had teachers in every building when I started off in music ed, but now they do have itinerant teachers. So I am noticing that it is becoming increasingly common in the areas that I did look at. And my participants in the different parts of New Jersey said, all of us are itinerant in my district. And there wasn't one district where it was like, hey, I'm the only itinerant person. And then connecting with Formato, one of the participants who was in a 2-building district, she's in a smaller district, but then her turning itinerant, I'm seeing that it is becoming increasingly common. And I can say that in my own district, I was the only one who was itinerant. There was a small pocket of us, but at the secondary level, it was mostly me. And now we have more who are itinerant and mirror my positions after 8 years in the district. So I would say, to answer it simply, I'm seeing it being more common.
Yeah, and it taps right into your systematic and structural factors of CST, just the
Mhm.
resource allocation, because years ago a township like Washington Township would have music teachers for everything. We had a lot of
Yes.
students from here who graduated and went on to the schools. Now, again, back to your CST, some of those resource allocations have changed, and it always impacts the arts first. And so we
Yeah.
see like it's kind of like it's just attached directly to your conceptual framework that resources sort of tell us if this is going to be more prominent, the idea of these transient teachers,
Yeah.
rather than 5-10 years ago these were staple teachers in these school systems.
Yeah, and that's why I feel a sense of urgency for this study as well. And when I went to the music teacher convention last week, I had a lot of these same conversations where it's either, oh my goodness, I just started teaching and I'm traveling and it's hard. Oh, I've been itinerant, but they cut another teacher. Now I'm doing another school. So I do believe it's becoming a lot more common after this study.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Dr. Ferguson.
Hi, folks. Apologies if the internet kind of breaks a little, but I'm going to talk a little slow and hopefully it'll mostly get captured.
Oh, geez.
So first off, Kate, I just want to say that I think, I really appreciated how much you dug into heuristic. I know
Thank
that
you.
was a big, compromise conversation we had at proposal, and we went back and forth a lot about exactly how to land this one. And I think you really picked it up and ran with it. And I think it's really well done. So kudos to you for taking on that challenge, for really embracing this. I know the study went a little bit different than where you originally planned it, but I think it was a really nice study. So just kudos to you, to Dr. Zion. The work that y'all did in this piece was really, really well done.
Thank you.
A couple of just thoughts and considerations for you. The framework that you developed, I thought was a really nice practitioner outcome, right? A very direct way to say to administrators, to teachers trying to advocate in a space of like, hey, here's what I need.
Yeah.
I would like to hear from you. Did your participants get to see that framework? Have they weighed in on it? Have you gotten feedback? Kind of how did that work for you?
Yeah. Yeah, so I actually did connect with participants. Not all of them got back to me, but I did email the poem I wrote and I made sure to keep that engagement with them. And a handful of them were actually at the convention and remembered me and came and saw what I did. So I got a lot of very good feedback about it. And even administrators came and saw my poster and were really excited about it and said, I've never had it like this in front of me, where kind of like you said, where we can see it, we can understand it. The only thing is I did have someone try to apply it to their situation. And they said, this helped me so much with starting that conversation and really understanding like the structural, administrative, and relational challenges I'm having at my job. And she said that the suggestions were very helpful too. But here's where the challenge is that I think I need to further develop is how can I specifically help these people with these changes if I don't understand what their exact experiences are? And I think it's something where I can offer help, I can offer a better understanding in that practitioner style. But the challenge is definitely that it's all relative to what that teacher encounters. So I think it's a good place to start. And most of the feedback that I did get was just, oh my gosh, someone's finally talking about it. And it's easy to understand because it's in that format. So I guess that's where I would like your feedback on is kind of what you think about that.
Yeah, so just a thought, really, because you were engaged so much with these participants, the heuristic kind of style, plus you've presented this now at a conference specifically for your practitioner article, right? The piece that you have targeted for Tempo right now. I think it would be nice to either send that model back to your participants and say, hey, if you happen to try a conversation with this, or if you have some thoughts, if you talk to some friends and you have any suggestions,
Sure.
anything you would add or anything you would change, like just kind of collect one more set of, it's not even really about the data at this point, so much as it is cleaning that framework up as much as you can, tightening it before you put it into print. I think it's just a nice option. Nobody could respond and there's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
But just a thought of, if you could send it one more round through feedback, I think that'd be nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not something that I'm suggesting for the sake of the dissertation. It's something I'm suggesting for the sake of kind of the usability of the piece,
Yeah. And that's something that I think crossed my mind definitely. And that's why I was so excited to present it and get feedback. And it's interesting because that the actionability, it wasn't really even something anyone mentioned. It was just more like, oh, this is awesome. I understand, these roles. Oh my gosh, we see these symptoms and it's kind of okay, but now what? Like I have all of this, I have something that can help you. And like I said, one of my colleagues did apply it and she said, oh my gosh, I do understand my issues now. But then it's kind of like until you submit those supports to admin, that kind of top of the funnel, it's like, what can I do to maybe even prepare for that? And I think that's what I need to develop. So, okay. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I just don't think it all has to be you, right? Like I think because these contexts are all just slightly different, as much as you can kind of collect across the group, I think will be nice.
Okay.
But again, not this document issue. This is just more of a forward-thinking issue.
Definitely.
A little more specific to your empirical article.
Sure.
I just want you to go back and look at, are there any, or maybe you already have, in which case just say so. Are there any voices of your participants that were left out of the empirical article? Have you checked, does everybody kind of show up in there, or is there anybody missing? I've glanced through it myself.
Yeah.
I think there might be one or two that kind of got left out. So I would just say review it and just take a look and see. It's not that every voice has to be there, but when it's only one person not there, it does start to read a little bit like, huh,
Yes.
what did they say?
And you know what? Oh, sorry, go ahead. Oh, I was going to say, because I found that some people who gave me more and answered the questions more in depth, I was able, and I'm sure this is a part of qualitative, like I was able to really say, wow, I have so much to work with. And then there's that person where you're like, oh, what is your teaching like? Oh, I teach on a stage. Okay, So I think, yeah, I'll dig deeper on that. Because also
Very
even in our
common.
artifacts, yeah,
And
I can look at
that's
that.
a great point too. Maybe it's an image, maybe it's a schedule, it could be something different. And I no way want it to read as every person must be equally represented. That's not how qualitative works. But when you do end up in a place where there's one person that just kind of end up missed, you just want to review that and see if there's any way that we can make sure folks
Yeah.
are represented, that voices come through is really
Mhm.
what we're after. And you're right, you definitely have some folks you use a lot. And that's normal in qualitative. You have folks that resonate differently. You have folks that are just chatty. And you mentioned you had 4 that didn't come to the group interview. So you just have less data from some folks,
Yep.
And so this is just reality.
Yeah.
And I'm not worried about it in your overview results. I'm only thinking about it in your empirical article because that's what most folks will actually see.
Okay.
And then one other thought I had, you mentioned it in the presentation here, but I don't see it in the document right now. You mentioned that you ended up with representation from across the state.
Mhm.
And right now you do a really nice job of talking about the participants and their different work environments.
Mhm.
But we don't really know anything else about the people.
Mhm.
And there may be information that you don't feel is relevant or that you don't need to share, but it might be nice to know a little bit more. Like, are these all really experienced teachers? Were there any brand new teachers? Are these all big districts? Are these all tiny districts? The fact that it's actually a cross section of the whole state is a great element of what you did, but I didn't see that in the writing anywhere. So again, it's more of a comment for, you could add like a little bit to your chapter of the overview, but then think about your article going to the empirical journal. Is there any other information that's important to kind of contextualize, especially for folks outside of Jersey? Who are these people? And what about that might be relevant in a Maryland or in a Maine or in a different
Expanded.
space?
Okay.
Exactly. So, and again, it may be that some of that detail you don't have, or you don't have permission to share, those sorts of things. You can kind of negotiate what you want to say.
Yeah.
Even a sentence of, experience ranged from first year to 20 years, you could do some of those sorts of contextuals as well. But that occurred to me as I was listening to you today.
Okay.
And then just kind of the technical statement of your formatting is a ways away from the Rowan required formatting, which is just going to be really not fun.
I know.
So totally up to you how you want to handle it. Set yourself some days and some treats that you love, or pay an editor to reformat it for you. It's up to you. But I just wanted to note it because they're going to make you and you're going to hate it. So just be ready.
I kept it in the doc because I was like, well, at least I can go in and edit, and I didn't want to like get into all that and then like hit space and something. So I honestly don't know how to format. So that's gonna probably be a team thing when I get there. But yeah.
I just don't want it to be a surprise. Honestly, that's the only reason I'm bringing it up, because it can be so jarring at the end of this process to be like, what do you mean I have 6 hours of work to do? So I just want to put that in your head now and make a plan so that you're not sad.
Yeah.
It won't be fun, but it'll work. Any other questions from the committee? No? Okay. Then I'm sorry, I lost the name of Brian, tech person. Yeah, if you could put the 3 of us committee members into a room, and once we go into this breakout room, that is the signal for you all in the audience to do whatever statements and congratulatory comments and lovely things that you want to while we debate.
Oh no. Right.
Well,
I just want to check who exactly are the committee members, so I put the right people in the room.
Zion, Barnes, and Ferguson.
Awesome. I'll do that right now.
Thank you, Ryan.
I love that we have a tech person on this call. That's fantastic.
Hey, I've been asking everybody to make sure they have somebody doing their back on that. So
that's amazing.
Hey, we trying to make it smooth.
So wait, Dr. Zion, should I stop recording right now so it doesn't record you guys, or should I keep it going? Because I don't know how that
works. Record us because it will only record the main room. So
okay.
So I think you keep it on so you can have moments to reflect on of the nice things people say to you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. All right.
Do you want to maybe stop sharing your screen so we can see everybody?
Sure. Thank you.
That's a nice idea.
I didn't even know I was still sharing. All right, there you go. Thank you.
I'm not as familiar with WebEx. I'm assuming it's going to give me an invitation to a room, or maybe it's just going to swoop me over.
I could, oh, there you go.
Ah, I got it. Okay, I'm joining the breakout session.
All right. Well, will you come back for me or okay? I guess
Yeah,
I'm in here.
They'll come.
They're
They'll
coming
come back
back.
when they're ready to talk to you.
Okay, yeah, I think one of them grabs me and I go in with them, right? Okay. Thank you for coming, everybody. We got a nice crew in here.
My gosh, you did so good. I loved how
Thank you.
personal everything felt. It really didn't feel because I don't know what I was imagining. I've never sat in on a dessert like an event like this before, an academic event like this before, and I thought that it would be like everything from your presentation having a lot of color to personal anecdotes and stories and how it relates to your personal experience because I feel like a lot of times people are very disconnected from their research and they do it so that they can explore those arenas. But this was so deeply personal to you that I feel as if I was like walking around in a day in the life and making
Aw,
these observations and then turning that into something academic. So that was really cool.
yeah. Thank you. And I know some people in here writing their dissertations. That's heuristic inquiry. I mean, you're telling a story, it's very personal. And I will say, that poem I read at the end, I would cry. You could ask my mom, every time I'd practice, I'd cry. And today was the first time I didn't get a tear in my eye, because it's like it's something that's so shared. So I definitely think the heuristic methodology allowed me to really tell not my story, but just the story. Hi, Nanya. Hi, guys. It's so nice seeing everybody.
Kate, I'd have to say,
I have to go, Kate. I
Oh,
have to
thank
go get my
you.
daughter. You are amazing.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry to interrupt you, Tony.
Okay.
thank you.
Bye, everyone. I look forward to hearing how it turns out.
Thank you. Jacob. Sorry, Tony, what were you saying?
I was going to say that I wanted to thank you for bringing to light something very okay. I'm
Yeah.
a retired educator for 2 years, and my first year teaching in 1983. Okay, we're going back 40 some odd years, right? Um, I have lived this entire presentation. I've taught Suzuki strings for kindergarten kids and middle school orchestra class and band lessons. And I've taught string quartets in high school and choirs and private lessons in my home. So it's you have basically kind of said something that I never even thought could be a doctoral dissertation because it was just something that I did, and I have become a very, very what would you call not easygoing, but flexible teacher because you have to be flexible because if every time you made a stink, I'm in the library, but you're having this. Well, where am I going to go? No, I'm not.
Yeah.
So I took the kids from the library in the corner of the library, and they told me, you have to be quiet. And I'm like, I'm teaching
That's
15 little
absolutely
kids how to play
true.
the violin. How am I supposed to be quiet in the library? So I brought them, this is an old school up in Caldwell, actually,
Oh,
New
I have to
Jersey.
go. You guys can keep
And
talking. I gotta go.
okay,
I'll be back.
huh? And basically real quick, there were these foyers before you got into the bathroom, and so I took the children into the foyer, and that's where we had lessons. Well, all the kids went home and said we had lessons in the bathroom, and that was a big stink, and I ended up getting a spot. But sometimes you have to you have to really kind of like fight for your place, but yeah, I was very, very inspired by this. Really, Kate was one of my student teachers, in fact, in Washington Township. So I wouldn't have missed this for the world.
That's actually really awesome. I know how much work she's put into this and I'm so proud of her because Kate also just has that like auditory sensory like processing limitation that sometimes I mean like it's really hard in academic spaces. It's just really hard to work with that. So I'm personally really really proud of her. I feel like her personality shone through, and one of the great things I think about her is that she can condense a lot of like really really dense information from an ED program or a PhD program or a dissertation and just make it feel like a conversation because I really didn't feel overwhelmed at all. And I think that that speaks to her teaching ability because that's exactly what you need to do. You need to take complex ideas and steps and formats, and you need to make it a language that people who are like 12 years old, like her students, can understand. So for me, this was such a refreshing experience because I didn't know what to expect. I thought it was going to be like a very stuffy, big, high vocabulary, like out of reach, super. And I love academics, but you know, I come from my dad's a professor and stuff. So it was just different. I think it just shows Kate's natural style. I wonder how long they're gonna take. I really wish I could listen to their feedback. Like, why are we? Let me in.
I know this is like the worst part of it, that, you know, it's funny because Kate and I were talking last night. I'm one of her classmates, but I'm higher education track. And, you know, I'm not in K through 12, but I have a dance background, so I definitely support the arts. And her and I both came into this program being like, is this a place for, you know, just the regular smegular people that, you know, we don't use fancy words, and, you know, we're more of the artistic types. Even though I like to play higher ed, I will always be, you know, a humanities girly. So, you know, the processes like these, as soon as they were like called her back, I was like, oh no, she's by herself. I wonder how it's going. So I get that. I get that. But I'm like, we prepared for this, and I'm excited for her to finally celebrate this.
Yeah, she needs a well-deserved vacation. I'm sure, as do you. I'm not sure what your guys' plans are once all this is over, but I already said, Kate, I was like, where are we going this summer? No more school. Let's go to Puerto Rico or something.
I know, right? Like, I haven't taken a vacation in so long. And it's funny though, because like Kate and I, we weren't in similar circles, but we met at a wedding in like during pandemic time, I think like 2021. And we sat next to each other, and we had no idea that we would end up in the same doctoral program. So it's crazy to think since then where we are now, you know, especially with the pandemic. So yeah, I'm excited to hear where everybody's, you know, going to do, or like what we're going to enjoy when we have our life back, you know. So
Yeah, definitely, which is this summer. So it's gonna be a good one.
Does anybody know if her research would be? I mean, this is an awesome presentation you can show to superintendents. I didn't know if the research was going to be. I mean, she could be a speaker at any school to show. So, oh, you're back.
Sorry, Tony.
back.
I'm back. Oof.
Zion, you're muted.
Oh,
Always come back muted, and I just never 20,000 Zooms a day and can't get it. Anyways, what I was saying was amazing, but here we are. This is the moment where you get to officially welcome Dr. Kate Wyatt.
thank
Wow.
you.
Yes.
Ready?
Yes.
She has a list of edits that include changing her name. That's it. So
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
That's
Do we call
awesome.
you? Is it doc or doctor?
Congratulations, Kate. You
Thank you,
certainly
everybody.
deserve it. This is
Vera.
your
Thank you.
So
congratulations.
happy.
Congratulations,
Congratulations.
Kate.
Thank you,
Dr.
everybody.
Wyatt. Dr. Wyatt.
Thank you, guys. I have students in here.
Wyatt.
Oh my gosh.
All the way from
Thank you,
a vet
Dr.
clinic
Wyatt.
with a patient. But he congratulates
Aw,
you too.
Oh, look at the puppy.
thank you, guys. There's Tony. Now I'm crying.
So proud of you, Kate.
Thank you. I'm proud of you too, guys. Seriously. This represents all of us. Like, that's the whole thing. So thank you so much, everyone, for being by my side and just listening to all that. Here's my mom crying. Oh, thank you, guys. All right, now.
So when's the party?
There's going to be a few. Yes. Oh my
That was
goodness.
awesome.
Well, thank
That was
you,
my
guys.
first time sitting in on anything like this, and it was, I didn't know what to expect. It was great. Yay!
Thank you. I know. Well, hey, it was my first time doing this too. You know, I watched some of my classmates, and they inspired me. They made me feel excited. And I think overall, you know, I have students of mine watching it. My childhood teacher Vera's in here. friends, family, and it's just, it's a beautiful thing when you really think of what affects you and you can present it in this way. Like you were saying, Tony, this was my lived reality for 10 years. And it always was not complaining, making it work, turning the, away and just knowing it's for the kids. And it turned into this. So I can't wait to see where it goes, what happens next. So thank you, everybody.
And Dr. Wyatt, when you go back and watch the video, I want you to pay particular attention to the faces of Ardith and Alexis and Jennifer, who, when I introduced you, they just, all three of them just kind of glowed up for you. So
you guys are next.
I'm tearing up for you, Kate. I really am. I'm so, I know I just recently joined, but it's so awesome to see all the conversations you've had on the back end and see you be here. It's truly awesome. So congratulations.
It is. And I'm telling you, attending other people's defense, that's what got me ready. Cause I was like, I watched this person start their study and now here they are talking about it so confidently and they know all the ins and outs. And I'm going to be honest, I got really anxious yesterday because I was like, this is almost an hour long. Is anyone going to get mad at me? And just seeing how everyone was receptive to what I'm saying. And Tony, saying how you did this for decades and that you finally had someone talk about it. It's that's why I did it. So thank you so much, everybody. I know this was a long meeting.
Please make sure that something is published by the time I have to cite sources for my own study.
I will.
Please.
I have no idea what the next step is, but I will figure it out and have it ready. Thank you so much. And I'll see
Kate,
you.
all I think is how tough it was for you. And the first thing that comes to mind is start from the bottom. Now you're here. Look at you.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm so proud of you. Awesome.
They tried to push me out at one point. Okay. Thank you so much. But you know what? You got to just keep going and trust that what you're doing matters. And that's the whole thing with this. I knew there'd be people whose voices would be included in here. And, no matter what you're doing, as long as you're passionate about it, really pays off. So thank you so much, guys. All of you were a part of this at some point, whether it was when I was 8 years old, 20 years old, teaching, student, whatever. So thank you so much, guys.
Kate, Jacob wants to say hi and congrats.
Who?
Jacob.
Oh, hi, Jacob.
Hey, congrats from one PhD to another. Congratulations.
Thank you. EDD. Thank
We're
you
so
so
proud
much.
of you.
EDD, sorry.
Thank you, guys.
I'm going to head out. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Congratulations, Kate.
Yeah, we can
you
go, guys.
are an inspiration, and we're so proud of you. And I wanted to mention that your presentation was amazing, and I really loved your poem at the end. It was beautifully written.
Thank you. Yeah, I was fighting tears the whole time. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank
poem,
you. What's that?
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Dr.
Thank you,
Squad.
everybody.
Dr. Squad.
Dr. Squad. Doc Wyatt. I like it.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. All right. I'll see you all
Awesome.
soon. Thank you, Dr.
very much.
Brown.
It was enjoyable.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ferguson. Dr. Barnes left, but thank you, guys. I'll see you soon.
Dr. Wyatt, save your video, and maybe you can cut it down so that the people who missed it get to see it without having to see all the conversation.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think it's very well done.
Thank you, Dr. Zion. And it will just send to me, right?
WebEx should save it, and you should get an email because if it's your WebEx account, you should get an email with a link to it or something.
That's right. Okay. Thank you so much. I'll see you Tuesday.
Go celebrate.
I will. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Kate. Bye,
Bye.
Dr.
Bye, Colin. Bye, Colin.
I'll talk to you later. See ya.